This afternoon I've come into the shed on what is a pretty ordinary day, a bit windy, occasional shower outdoors, to prepare for summer. Over summer it gets dry here in Tasmania and we need to water the garden. Thankfully we have a spring available and we have plentiful water available in terms of continuous supply, but we don't have a lot of pressure. So we can only run a single butterfly sprinkler at any one time. Now, for the last couple of years I've been using this sprinkler unit here, which I made up myself because I simply couldn't buy one that I liked. Having one works fine given that you can only run a single one, but you're always chasing it around the property. Where is it today? So what I've decided to do is to make a few more because they're not expensive to make, so that we can have them in different locations and turn them on as we need. So I thought you might be interested to come and have a look and see how I make them. I made this one the other day. It's a slightly better design than my original one because the first time you're always experimenting, but it has the same basic structure. So today I've got to make two more. So I brought you in closer here to have a look at the basics that you need for it. Aside from the timber base, which I'll show you how to make shortly, what I'm using is a single 1 meter riser, it's a poly riser, and a brass butterfly sprinkler screwed on top. Now these are solid brass butterfly sprinklers. I like these, but you can utilize any butterfly sprinkler that's available. There's quite a range of them on the market, but I do like these solid brass ones. There's an elbow, poly elbow at the end. So this is what you'd call a 1 inch or a 25 poly, and then screwed into the end here is the attachment for the hose to fit onto. Now with these, I find it's really good to match the brand that you're using with your hose. That way you're going to get a better fit. If you have different brands to your hose, often they don't quite match up correctly. This one's a Nylax, and we've got Nylax fittings on most of the hoses. Nylax is really tight, doesn't leak. But if you're using a different brand hose on it, often you'll get problems and leakage. So I've actually put a little bit of thread tape on both places, you'll see, and that's assembled. I will have to take the top off to actually put it into the base when I've made it. The other thing that you use is a saddle like this to hold it in place, but you'll understand that better later. Now I've made a template for cutting out the timber. There are 3 pieces of timber that you need. This is the center, and this is for the legs, and it fits across this way, and of course you have 2 of these, one for the other side. So I'm going to mark these out now. Now in terms of timber, I'm using some offcuts of 50 by 200 sleeper. Now this is a treated pine. It will last fairly well outdoors. From my experience, it's going to be wet a lot of the time. These sprinklers are mostly going to be used around the flower garden, so I'm not so worried about the treated pine. If you're using it in a vegetable garden, you may want to use some hardwood rather than this. Simply trying to utilize it as efficiently as possible and fit these together. There's always going to be some loss because they're rather an unusual shape, and I can reverse this one, come in this way. It saves cutting, though I'll have to cut across here. Now one note with this piece, which is the center piece, try and have the grain running, if you're making these, running the long way rather than coming across this way. The reason is that when you cut this piece out, you have to cut this through with a chisel. It's going to be much easier to split it out, having cut in each side with the grain coming across. If you're doing it the other way, it's really difficult. So all I need to do now is to cut those out, which I'll do with the power saw. Now, while I was able to cut the bulk of it out with the power saw, there is still a bit that has to be finished off with the hand saw. Having done this the right way, I should be able to take that out pretty easily with the chisel. Yep, that just came out nicely. Now, these are a bit rough. I'm not building a work of art. I'm building something that simply has to work as a sprinkler base. I still need to cut one piece off there, I see. I trim those down. You might ask, why not leave this all the way across and just use a triangle? Why cut it like this? It's basically because it works a lot better if you have 4 individual pieces for it to sit on uneven ground than if you have just one flat piece, which if it's a bit rough, it's going to be unstable. And I found, yeah, with the 4, you can get it more stable. A bit of tidy up. I messed up on this cut. I'll try and do better on the next one. I've laid this one out a little bit different on the board, and the 2 legs together and this one coming against it, and maybe used a little bit less timber, hopefully a bit simpler to cut. I was hoping to be able to say that that second layout was more efficient with the timber and used less of it, but I made a mistake and miscut this one. It should have been cut here, not there. This was a mistake in cutting the other line, and that really did make a difference because there has to be 2 screws in here. It may not have been as stable, so I had to recut, and that used a little more timber. It would have been a better layout if I hadn't made that mistake. I'm not going to give you templates for these, but I will give you some measurements. The measurements are probably best taken off this one that I have built, and you'll understand looking underneath here how this works, that this saddle holds it in and holds it tight so that you can actually plug it on. The centerpiece, they are 90 millimeters high and 150 wide. The inlet is 25 millimeters and 40 millimeters wide, and so that's designed to just fit this into it and come reasonably tight when you put that saddle clamp over it. Now with these, okay, I was measuring off this and I've forgotten. It's 250 millimeters right across, and the height of these is 130 millimeters. So that means that when you actually sit it up like this, you've got a 250 millimeter square. So it's nice and stable at the base, and the total height here then is 150 millimeters with that little bit of elevation. Now I've only really done that to increase the stabilization here and to get this off the ground so you can fit the hose on nicely. You can move that up and down, make this higher if you would like. It's entirely your choice. But with those measurements, you should be able to draw something up that's fairly similar. I'd really like this long height. Most of the sprinklers you can buy are fairly short. Having it high means that you can get it over the top of tall flowers, shrubs, and get a wider spray as well. Next stage is to actually drill a hole through here for the pipe to come through. So the first thing I need to do is to mark a central point here, and then using this bottom, which should be square to your sides, that's fairly key that the base of this is square to the sides, marking a line up there which gives me a center line to come down, and then a line across there. The goal is, as I drill down here, to come out in the center of this. You could alternatively try and mark here and drill through from this way, your choice. And again, finding the center of this, which is easier than working on the other side. That gives me the drill point to come through. To drill it out, you want a 28 millimeter spade bit, and try and drill as straight as you can. Now in drilling, I've put a scrap of timber underneath because I don't want to break through and hit the metal of the vise underneath. So I've come out reasonably well through there, and this piece of timber protected my bit. So one more of those to do. Okay, I'll clean up the work area. So the next stage is to screw this into place, and before doing that I simply need to drill a couple of holes through each of these, and then I'll screw one on, getting this nice and upright, then bring the other one on, and that way achieve that stability. Now you've got a fairly wide section that you can work through there, but it's basically going to be coming through here, so working from this level of the feet is the best place to go, and put some lines through. That gives you an idea where this is going to come in. Doesn't have to be in any way precise. I'm pretty rough, a bit of a bush carpenter, particularly when I'm building this type of thing. A bit different when you're building a house. A couple of 6mm holes. And we'll use 100mm batten screws to put it together. So 100mm, you say that goes a fair way. Yes, it comes in, but it doesn't come through this far. So it'll come in about so far. Nice thread coming into this wood. I will drop this back one size to about a 5.5 and drill through, because otherwise there's a risk, if you don't drill into here, there's a risk of splitting your timber and it'll fall apart a lot quicker, if not immediately. Now the trick here is to do one at a time. Alright, so I'll put in the top one, just mark that, pull it a little. Then put it in. For this second one, I can use the square to make sure that I'm getting this upright. So turning it, twist it so that it's actually going to be pointing the right way. If you want to be 100% sure, because the actual hole might not be precise, the best thing then is to actually put in the actual sprinkler. And here I've got a little problem. I didn't quite get this in center enough, and you see it doesn't quite match. So I'll have to do a little cut at this stage to get that to fit before I can go ahead. Now it goes in. That's good. While it's there, we may as well put the next part on, which is this. Comes on at that point. Got a little bit more slop there than I really need. A couple of screws will hold this in place. With the piece in place, I'm able to get a better idea of what is upright. There's a little bit of play, but I can get a good look and see whether it's standing up straight. Should be around about there, should be pretty good, and that it's all square before I drill. Mark this hole in a little. So now I can worry about this angle and get it straight this way before putting the second set of screws in. The bottom set, I'm actually only using 75mm batten screws, simply because I don't want to split this base. tape really shouldn't be put on before it's assembled, but a little bit more tape. And that's one sprinkler ready to go. Only mistake I made was I cut a little bit too far in here so that it's a little bit sloppy in that way, but it'll be nice and stable and it will work just fine. This one hasn't been assembled at all, so I will put some tape on and assemble the base part of it. So that it really only needs to be hand tight, you don't need any tools. I use a little bit of tape on this too, just to make sure it seals better. And we'll do the top section when we put that one together. Did better this time, it just slides in perfectly. And the final stage, put the sprinkler on. So here's the family of sprinklers. This is the old original one, and these are the 3 new ones, 2 that we made today. This one's got an older sprinkler head on it, but the new ones will go just fine. They need a little bit of running in to get nice and free and to throw really well. But it's going to be a lot easier having these 4 around, and we won't have to look as far when we need to find a sprinkler. So hopefully that's given you an idea of what you can do if you'd like to build something similar.